Salvete, discipuli optimi, discipulaeque optimae. Welcome to Conspectus Grammaticus Capituli Decimi, our summary or overview of all the major grammatical ideas we'll encounter as we read and discuss Capitulum Decimum, Bestiae et Homines. Our objective is to keep this summary short, brevis, to the point, ad rem, and useful, utilis. Incipiamus! In this tutorial, we're going to be covering these ideas. We'll be talking about third declension nouns, in fact, more third declension nouns, as you're already familiar with the basic functioning of this family of nouns. And we'll also be introducing a third gender into the third declension noun family, the neuter gender. We'll be talking about cum, not as a preposition, but as a temporal conjunction. We'll be talking about quod, used as a synonym for quia. We'll also be talking about various uses of the infinitive, including the active and the passive infinitive, the infinitive of verbs together with posse, velle, and audere, and about the accusative plus infinitive construction. There's not too much to be said here. This chapter provides a great opportunity to practice a lot with these nouns so that you become really comfortable reading, writing, and using them. We do, however, see our first introduction to third declension neuter nouns. It's a very soft introduction. You're only going to be introduced to 3 neuter nouns in 2 different forms, the singular form and the plural form. You'll notice the familiar a ending for plural neuter that you recognize in earlier nouns from the second declension. On to topic number 2, cum temporal conjunction. We're already very comfortable with the idea of using cum as a preposition with the ablative case to express the idea of being with someone. So, for example, when we want to say Paul walks with his friend, we would simply say Paulus ambulat cum amico suo. The new usage in this chapter, however, is cum as a temporal conjunction, a conjunction meaning that it takes 2 clauses and joins them together. So, for example, if we wanted to say Paul learns well and join that together with he does his homework and say that this happens when the other thing happens, we would use when in English. In Latin, we simply would express this as Paulus benediscit, discere, to learn, cum pensum domesticum facit. Topic 3. Quod as a causal conjunction. We have seen quod many times before. For example, quod nomen est tibi is quod as an interrogative. In this chapter, we're going to use quod as a causal conjunction, meaning it's joining 2 clauses together and it's showing that one causes the other. In this case, it's very simple to think of quod as essentially being equivalent to quia. Think of them as synonyms. So, for example, if we wanted to say Marcus est puer improbus, quia puellam pulsat, that would look very familiar. In this chapter, however, we'll see this. Marcus est puer improbus, quod puellam pulsat, and they both express essentially the same idea. Topic number 4, the infinitive, active and passive. We are very comfortable with the idea of the infinitive at this point. Numerare, videre, emere, audire. These are the 4 verb families that we've seen many times up to this point. You may recall that we have compared the infinitive to a raw vegetable, meaning that a vegetable that hasn't been sliced or diced yet. The possibilities, therefore, are endless. In this chapter, we're going to do something new with the infinitives, however. So let's move this aside. And what we want to do is we want to take these infinitives that are active in meaning right now, to count, to see, to hear, and we want to transform their meaning by simply removing the ending. We're going to remove the ending on each one of these verbs. Going to go a little further on that one. You'll see why in just a second. And we're going to add a new ending. We're going to add the ending ri. We're going to add this to each of these verbs. And that is going to change the meaning from to count to be counted, from to see to to be seen, from to buy to be bought, and from to be heard, from to hear to be heard, simply by adding the ending ri. You'll notice, however, that with the third conjugation verb emmere, that we chopped off the whole ere and just added the letter e. So the final infinitive would be emmi, to be bought. This is a peculiar characteristic of the third verb family, and we'll practice that quite a bit in class. Topic 5. The infinitive plus posse, velle, audere. The verb velle conveys the idea of will. In other words, when you want something to happen, for example, you could use the verb velle. Posse, as we already know, conveys the idea of ability, to be able to, or to can, as we say jokingly. Audere conveys the idea of daring and courage. It's the root of our English word audacity. So how would we use these together with an infinitive in a Latin sentence? Imagine that this is Marcus. What we would say here is that Marcus wants to fly. In Latin, we'd say Marcus volare vult. So you can see here that what we've done is we've taken the subject Marcus. This is just like in English. We take the subject Marcus, or in English Marcus, and we say what he wants, and then we say what he wants to do, which you'll recognize is the English infinitive, in this case, to fly. In Latin, we'd say to fly, volare, volare. So we have this phenomenon of taking an infinitive form and putting it together with a conjugated form, vult. This is expressed in the same way with posse and also with audere, and it's something we'll practice quite a bit throughout this chapter. Although all of the ideas in this chapter are important, one of the most important is the idea of the accusative plus the infinitive construction. And I have this picture up because, as you'll see, we're going to be practicing this idea in the context of verbs of hearing and seeing and other verbs of sensing. So how does this work? Let's take, for example, a verb that or a sentence rather, that we're already quite familiar with. The idea expressed here. Let's just imagine for a minute. Here we see Marcus, okay? And if we were to want to express that fact that I see Marcus, I would say ego Marcum video, okay? But now what if Marcus is laughing and I want to say that I see Marcus laughing? How would I do that? Well, Latin uses this construction that we refer to as the accusative plus the infinitive, and we would say, here's ego Marcum video from the last sentence, but I need to add the bit about seeing Marcus, not just Marcus, but Marcus laughing. So I'm going to take the infinitive, I'm going to take the infinitive of, which is ridere, I'm going to pop it right into that blank spot there. And the sentence now becomes ego Marcum ridere video. In other words, I see Marcus laughing. We could also translate that as I see that Marcus laughs. Let's look at this at another example of this. Here we have Julia Latine, and let's imagine that Marcus is seeing her. So we'd say Marcus videt Juliam, Marcus Juliam videt. But he sees Julia not just standing there, but rather laughing. How would we express that? Julia cantat. We would say Marcus videt Juliam, and again we would take the infinitive and we would just pop it right into that blank spot, cantare. And we're left with Marcus Juliam cantare videt. Marcus sees that Julia is laughing, that Julia laughs, or Marcus sees Julia laughing simply. This is a big idea, and it's one, of course, that requires much more explanation. I have a whole tutorial that you can do on the side that explains this more thoroughly, and we'll also work on it, as I've said before, quite a bit in class. So in this tutorial, we've talked about third declension nouns. We've talked about the introduction to third declension neuter nouns, cum being used as a temporal conjunction, meaning when, quod being used as a causal conjunction, meaning because. We've talked about the infinitive, both the active form and the passive form of the infinitive. We've talked about constructions that use the infinitive plus posse, velle, and audere. And finally, we touched on the accusative plus infinitive construction. that concludes our Conspectus Grammaticus, Capituli Decimi. I hope it's been helpful to you. I know we've probably gone over our 5-minute mark, but nonetheless, I hope that this has proved very valuable to you and that it will be something you can refer back to as we work through this chapter together. Gratias maximas, nos videbimus mox.